Well, thank you, everyone. I hate to interrupt this great conversation, but thank you, everybody, for coming to our first in-office, in-person, collaborative cafe. We are so excited you are all here. Ellen, let's sneak in. I love seeing all of these familiar faces. It's so great to see you, on screen, but of course, in here in person is even better. So, today we're going to be talking about a really important topic that I'm sure you guys are all passionate about, which is why you're here, which is developing our leaders. So we have a couple of great panelists here, which I'll provide you a little bit of background information on, but I would hope most of you are familiar with HR Collaborative, but if this is your first time meeting us and joining us on site, so we are a community of fractional HR experts that provide HR talent and solutions when and where you need it. So we do everything under the HR umbrella. Just tell us how we can support you and we'll find the right solution that fits your needs. So in this cafe, like I said, we're going to be developing your leaders in this upcoming year. We know that it's been a challenging year, that it's been a challenging few years, if we're being honest here. And looking forward to our panelists, our experts that are, have worked with employees and leaders and developing them and their talents. My speaking part is quite short. So I am Lisa Brown. I am our Vice President of Client Services here at HR Collaborative, which really means I'm kind of the in-between to connect you with the people that do all the great work that we do. So with that, we've invited Anna Baeten from Failure Lab. She's the Director of Organizational Training. And Anna uses her knowledge of strategy and scaling to help organizations remove failure-based roadblocks to innovation, collaboration, and creative thinking. So with her background in marketing, communication, and leadership, Anna seeks to learn what motivates people to do better and be better. And then Julie over here, one of our wonderful team members here, HR business partner here at HR Collaborative, has more than 20 years of experience in HR. You wouldn't believe it by looking at her, but she does. She's worked in a diverse industry setting, including healthcare, corporate, nonprofit, professional service, and manufacturing. So she's Julie of all trades, with her extensive, or of all industries, I guess. It's really HR. With her extensive work across multiple industries, Julie is a proven asset in the areas of performance management, organizational development, and talent strategy. So with that, I will turn over the conversation to them and just kind of tee up the conversation and let them run wild from there. So running wild, we're wild and crazy as much as HR can get over here, right? I know, with it, wild and crazy, in air quotes, right, folks? So really, we just want to, have a conversation, share with you some things that we're seeing in the leadership space and how we want to develop our leaders in this upcoming year. We know that, leadership within our organizations, frontline leaders all the way up to our higher level leaders are really pivotal in giving our employees, providing them the motivation to do the work that they're doing and encouraging them to contribute effectively to the organization. And then for those of you, I know you guys all read every single article we sent you ahead of time. So for anybody who may have missed or forgot what they read, one of the challenges or one of the difficulties that we're facing is this whole concept of VUCA, right? And I know you all had to look it up, just like I did when I said Stanford again, but it's that volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world that we're living in. I mean, if anything, the last 4 years here have been nothing but volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, right? And so how do we respond to that? How do we develop our leaders in a VUCA world? For those of you who, when you registered, we asked those of you, what kind of challenges are you facing? And so some of the things that we heard from you all that we're going to talk about a bit today in our panel discussion here are the challenges that you are currently experiencing, facing, or have heard other organizations face right now. One of those being leadership loneliness, gaps in trust throughout the organization, and of course with our leaders. Finding the time to lead or train our leaders, our managers, our frontline leaders, while still getting things done, right? Like, how do you find that balance? And then for those that, we've had a hard time finding the talent to do the leading, right? If we don't have them in-house, how do we make sure that we're finding the right talent to lead our teams? And so with that, I'm gonna start with you, Julie.
Oh, you are?
Well, okay. Is that okay? Okay. Obviously, we've rehearsed this over and over. Well, I know that well, first of all, we want to talk about, why is leadership important? Like, why are leaders important for an organization? Why do we have them? Why don't we just say, here's our doers, and here's people that tell them what to do?
When I think about why is leadership important, obviously people are looking to be inspired. When you're working in a role, you're looking to see, where are we headed as an organization? What's important for us to achieve? We're not just here to check a box. We're not just here to sit in a seat and go on. But every one of us has a key role. Thank you. Louder, Julie. Every one of us has a key role that contributes to where our organization's headed, right? How many of you in the audience here are clear on the focus of your organization? Just by a show of hands, if you could say, where are we headed as an organization? That's a good turnout. I like that. That means you're talking about strategy toward your goals, right? That means you're thinking about goals. Without that leadership to really help provide that direction, provide that focus, we're not effective in our role. We're not effective in moving in a direction. And all of us want to move in a direction when we go to work every day. When we leave our families and spend a bunch of time outside of our home, we want to be focused on something. So what we're seeing without that leadership effectiveness is burnout, turnover. We're seeing a lot of movement. People are just not overly inspired to do the work that they're there to do. So, I'm going to ask Anna. Anna, from your perspective, what traits of leadership really stand out to you? What greatest boss you ever had or you ever worked with? What were the traits that really rang true to that organization?
I love that question. My answer is probably a little bit different than what most people's answers are. I think that a couple of things that are very, very important to me, especially if we're talking about like human-centered leadership, which to me is obviously very important. That's what we do, right? Like, we do human-centered leadership. So to answer your question, I'm like, leadership is about strategy and it's about humans, right? So it's about who is caring for and responsible for those two big buckets of work, right? And so if those are the guiding posts of like what we're looking for leadership, a couple of the things that I think are really important and undervalued are, one, de-escalation. Right, the ability to de-escalate, like having the emotional intelligence to be able to accurately read the emotional feel of the room, the energy of the room, and to be able to de-escalate and then also sort of distill information out, right? And then from a human-centered perspective, I think that leadership, good leadership, is really tasked with this overarching sustainability of all of their assets, including human assets, which means that we're not looking at what is the productivity in a day, we're looking at what is the lifetime productivity of the people, right? So that's where we get into wellness, culture, like all of the things where it's like we can't sacrifice in a day what's gonna hurt us later on, right? And that's very difficult, right, to kind of keep both of those things in your mind, but obviously we're tasked with the productivity of our organizations as well.
So for the group, any volunteers out there who would say, what is that best trait that a leadership, that one of your leaders or higher leaders brings to you in your role? Any volunteers? So your favorite thing about your boss?
My leadership experiences have been here and abroad on large-scale projects, working with new teams. And so I've tried to leverage my own leadership skills no matter what position I held within the organogram, working across it. And I think something that Anna said really struck a chord with me, the ability to synthesize information and make connections. And a lot of that has come down for me to expectations. We're not just working within the organization, but we're working with partnerships and often very complex relationships, and we need to be able to move quickly, right, to the VUCA, paradigm that's been developing very quickly. So those are the things that stand out to me, understanding people's expectations within and without, and being able to leverage and mobilize those to help us get to those core goals. Not, let's get next quarter, numbers up, but what are we looking at more holistically, the organization, where do we need to be?
Ensuring that's woven throughout everything that we do. Any other volunteers, any other thoughts that the group might have on what really made a leader a great leader for you?
I would say absolutely de-escalation. The moment you said that, it was, and the human piece, but de-escalation is so key no matter what level of conflict you're dealing with in the moment. It could be a small group meeting, it could be one-on-one, but someone who has the ability to pause and truly take it back to zero, and understand what's actually going on, because at the end of the day, any of those moments could turn into a larger risk, a larger impact to the organization, so someone who can refocus those moments.
I worked with a CFO recently who used the analogy of, a ship at sea. And when he has those different things that are being thrown at him throughout that day, or that week, or taking them off track from where their focus is, he says, I refocus the ship. We're sailing toward that. And I think about that a lot, because obviously everything we do, we're being thrown curveballs of, this is reactionary. We need to think about what's happening in this moment and respond to it. And I think that's a very real challenge in the VUCA environment that our leaders have, staying focused, being that ship toward, sailing toward your port. So one just enclosure there, thinking about how leaders, each of you have different ideas of what the ideal leader is for you. You all work in different ways. You have different motivations, different stressors. So I do think that's an area when you think about leadership effectiveness, and what biggest, a huge challenge that leaders have is finding that time to connect individually with their teams to identify, have that human-centered approach, but really doing it in a meaningful way given the time that they have and the time that they have available.
So, we talked about these, so these are the things that, makes leaders effective, or what are, what are the competencies or the behaviors, those that make a great leader. What would you, we're gonna kind of flip that coin here. What's not working in leader effectiveness? What are we seeing in our own organizations we're working with? What's not working?
You want me to? I'll start with that one.
Sure.
What's not working? I think that I like to move from a space of assuming that we all have good intentions, right? And so I think that nobody sets out to be a poor leader, right? Like it's just distracting. And to kind of bounce off of what Julie said is that humans are emotional beings, we are driven by emotions. And hey, guess what, leaders? You are also humans, driven by emotional things. And so there are things that you're being pulled in so many different directions all the time. The biggest thing, the most tactical thing, is just making space, right? Making time to prioritize development for yourself, development for your people, development, attention to culture, all of those kinds of things, and actually carving out the time to be working on your business versus inside of your business. And I know that that's something you read it, but then you actually have to do the thing. And I think the painful part about that is that sometimes that means that you can't go as fast as you want, right? We have to adjust expectations to what Mark's saying. We might have to adjust expectations about what that timeline looks like if we want to get there in a healthy, robust, sustainable way. And the actuality of that is much harder than it is when you read it in a book. So the other thing I would say about that is we talk a lot about, has anybody here read any Michael Mauboussin? It's not leadership, he's a finance guy that studies complex dynamic systems. Super fascinating. But he talks a lot about the idea of the knowing versus the identifying versus being able to act on something. So I think a lot of times when we're in leadership development spaces, people think, well, I know the thing. I've read the book, right? I have been to the cafe. I've written down the soundbite, right? I know the piece of information, right? And that's the first step, right? The second step is being able to identify when that is happening in real life, right? So if we're being triggered, or if there's an emotional thing, can I notice that that's happening in my spaces? And then the final third point is can you do something about that, in real time, right? And that whole process is actually so much more complex and so much more time consuming and requires so much more practice than we might like to believe that it would. So I think that so often we read the book, we do the thing, we have the information, and we think that that is enough. And that is not enough, right? We have to continually be committed to the practice of how do we do these activities and behaviors in real time over and over and over again.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I guess to piggyback on that, when you think about the conversation, I had an example yesterday. I was talking with a leader out in New York, and her question was, managers had a challenge. Their family member of an employee passed away. What can they talk to them about? And I thought, gosh, just, I'm thinking about the value of just asking the question, asking that employee how they're doing, taking the time to just, and be vulnerable in that space, because I think people think there has to be a textbook for all of these things, right? All of these conversations. Just being okay with just saying, how can I support you? I don't have all the answers, but I'm here for you. In those moments, that's just one example of how, leaders really struggle with those, with that communication, with putting themselves at risk, I think. I think there are times when you're like, what if I say the wrong thing, obviously. So, it's the practice. I think that's a great point. It's like with anything. I'm not going to be a star pitcher on my softball team if I don't get out there and do it once in a while, right? Being in that uncomfortable zone, so.
Yeah, I think it's the whole, you always say think before you act. So it's like you know what it is, but how do you get yourself comfortable to do that and the habit of reacting?
And we're naturally biologically predisposed to not want to be uncomfortable. So that is the thing, and I think leadership is like, we don't sell it that way because nobody would want it. We'd be like, you're gonna be uncomfortable all the time. Like, be ready. Like, nobody is happy. Like, you're like, no, you will have power and authority. No, and also you'll be uncomfortable all the time, right? Like, so, but that is actually the practice, right? The practice is like being able to like sit in discomfort with somebody until we can come to a solution or something to move forward in. And I think that takes practice. Like, we have to practice doing that to be effective in it.
And I think that that impacts our ability to hold teams accountable too, right? You don't want to have, take the chance that either one, you're delegating to somebody who doesn't have the tools they need to do something effectively, or you don't want to have the difficult conversation with them to say, I need you to follow through on this. This is why this is important. And I think that's a big barrier right now with leadership effectiveness, just being able to have that difficult conversation, to be supported maybe by your upline to say, yeah, I am going to hold them to task on this because this is, this is what they're responsible for. There's a lot, what I'm seeing a lot of is just kind of like start and stop. Let's declare that that's an accountability in their role, and let's give them the tools to help them be successful. But then we often derail from it because of the sticky stuff that comes up with it, right? The difficult conversations that ensue.
That's great. I guess I want to open it up to our, time flies when we're having fun, right? This is really exciting stuff. But is there anything, just in the room here, that, talking, and of course you guys will talk in your groups too, but anything that, spark any, thoughts or ideas based on what, kind of what Anna and Julie have, identified as kind of the challenges that, why leadership is not working?
I'd be interested in what you have to say about trust. I was doing a session on culture for a next-gen group and a large manufacturer down in Cleveland. And they raised this issue of, it's not just about, it was in the context of a situation that, people expect me to trust, and they want to instill trust in us as leaders, but they're not placing trust in me.
Right.
So I'd just be interested in what role you think trust plays in leadership, and what some of the challenges are around that.
And I think that's huge. I think we hear a lot of, and I work with a lot of smaller organizations that, there might be, a longstanding owner, CEO who wants to eventually, back out of their role and retire, but they're not willing to let go of that. And it's continuously that circumventing of accountability, great direction coming from that middle management team, and employee doesn't like it, goes to the CEO, and it's undermined all the time. So I see, what I've thought about in those and tried to recommend in those situations is kind of that polarity mapping of, CEO, this is your end goal. This is where you'd like to be. This is where the organization is heading based on your direction, based on, the people you've put in place. So here's where we're at. We don't have a both and at this point. It's all or nothing on those two spectrums. And how do we get to a point where we can recognize when we're undermining our goals, when we're not working in that same direction, and start to put checks and balances in place and be able to open communication up and be objective about what we're missing here. So it's a concept that I think is helpful in those situations because it brings to light, my way does not have to be the right way always. We're working toward this goal. It helps you refocus on what that goal is, and that you can work in that space together based on those, those continuums.
I was listening to what Anna was saying, and Julie, and Anna said, Anna, right?
Yes.
Okay, sorry.
I'll respond to anything
Anna.
though.
It was, you said, we don't want to be uncomfortable, right? We're programmed not to be uncomfortable. And then Julie, you had said, someone had this loss and they're like, ask you, what do I say? Well, there's power in vulnerability, right? Brene Brown, power of vulnerability. And, but there is in a professional level. And I think a lot of people, and sometimes in leadership, forget that it's okay to be human.
It's so I was wondering if just real quickly there could be some insights on how you could externally, and I always word it as protecting your confidence, because that protects then your discernment and your vision and your decisiveness. But it's, what are some of the external tactics or strategies you can do personally outside of work to help you be better at your organizations?
I guess I'll speak to it sort of, I'm gonna try to wrap all of things into one thing, right? One of the words that I kind of hate right now that I think has been like super hackneyed and overused is authenticity, right? And I think that, not that I dislike authenticity, but I think the word has been sort of misused and kind of accommodated. And to me, what authenticity means is that you are consistent in how you show up. Right, like I can predict what you're going to be like based on what I understand about you. You're consistent, right? Like this is what I know to be true. And that's what I believe is the foundation of trust, right? So it's like trust is built over 7 bazillion little interactions that kind of bounce in the same direction, right? Like that we can understand what that looks like. And that, and when we're outside of trust, it means that we're getting thrown something out of left field without an explanation or something like that, right? So I think that when we think about trust, and also to your question, right? When we think about, to me, leadership is we have to model. Like we must model behavior. So whether or not that's modeling wellness behavior, whether or not that's modeling accountability behavior, whether or not it's modeling vulnerability, right? So like the skill, like, and I believe it to be like a skill that is, when done well, is masterful, is how do we do really thoughtful self-disclosure, right? It doesn't mean that we're spilling our guts all the time, but it means like when do we do thoughtful self-disclosure to assist in a conversation or to give humanness or to give framing, right? Like, so those sorts of things. So I think all of that is all kind of wrapped into sort of a way of being, right? That's like, this is what authenticity is for me, is that I believe that in order to be my most productive self, I have to have some kind of balance, and that's gonna look different for all people, right? And so that conversation is open and like candid to your group, right? Which also holds you accountable, right? So like now if we have like a really psychologically safe space, like I can say to you, it's a little sharp, is everything okay? Right, like what's happening? Like, right, do we need to go for a walk? Like right, in both directions, right? So if those things are sort of embedded, but they can't be embedded in a time of crisis, right? It has to be reverse engineered, right? All of that foundation has to be like laid.
We don't want to cut into the discussion time, but we talked about what makes a great leader. We talked about, what are some of the, what's working, what's not. What we haven't really talked about is the why, and I know we've kind of touched on it in a lot of the other discussion, but thinking about, why is leadership not effective? And I think it's really going to help us when we break out into our breakout groups, talk about the challenges we're facing and help us be a little reflective as to why. So we talked about having the time for development, investing in leaders, kind of getting those deposits in the bank. I think this is what's interesting, and we can come back and discuss more in a group if it doesn't bubble up during the conversations, but are leadership skills inherent, or can they be taught, or is it a combination of the both? And then I know the very leader, we talked about this earlier, but not being able or willing to give up the short-term the short-term effectiveness. Are we producing the widgets that we need to be producing, and instead investing in our leaders to be more effective long-term, and of course healthy, and stick around, right? We need great leaders. So I think we were getting the signal to wrap it up. So we're gonna go into our breakout rooms. We'll have 3 breakout rooms. The color. I'm being told I have to corral all of us from having all the fun. So hopefully you guys all had great discussions. I know you did, because I was speaking at all the wonderful notes that our facilitators and note takers were taking. And because we had such great conversation, we really wanted to keep the themes section short. So any of you that do have questions for our wonderful panelists, have time to do so. So
really those that bubbled up to the surface is, what we saw in each of the groups is that executive buy-in really is a challenge. How do we get our executive leadership team to understand the value of investing in leadership development of our frontline managers and those, lower in the hierarchy? And then really that concept of managing up. So, a lot of us are familiar with the fact that HR doesn't always have a seat at the table, right? And so our role is to also help manage those executive leaders understand the value of investing in that leadership development. I also saw in there that, sometimes it's as simple as asking your executives to be vulnerable as well. Like, we know that this is uncomfortable for you, but let us try it so we can demonstrate the value of it. So we gotta ask for that sometimes. Also saw some themes around the changed leadership skills and competencies, what worked 10, 15, 20 years ago, and how you lead your people does not work today. This is a new world that we're living in. The way that we used to do it it's changed. So we have to make sure that we're keeping up with the times, if you will. And then of course part of that is really that human-centric leadership, right? We heard both Julie and Anna, like, it's okay to be people. It's no longer about, widgets like production. It's okay to be people. Ongoing training, again, it's not one and done. This is something that's done over time and evolves as your workplace evolves, as the world around us evolves, as people evolve, as your teams evolve. It's something that you have to continually focus on and evolve as your organization and your people do. There's also no one-size-fits-all solution to training, right? What one leader may need to develop in is not what every leader needs to develop in. We should make sure that we have consistent skills, but where one of us needs to develop isn't necessarily where the other one does. And there's a lot of resources out there to leverage and in different ways to deliver that training for your leaders. And also encouraging your organizations to invest in the people in that development. Sometimes it's hard to say, hey, this is the amount I need you to invest in your people. What can I have to, devote to that development? And then last but definitely not least, that clear and transparent communication. I don't think that we've ever done a cafe where communication hasn't been one of the top themes that we hear, right? It's clear and transparent communication, set clear expectations. What are we looking for as an end result? Holding them accountable, but then letting your people work to achieve those. They don't need to be micromanaged. If you've put them in a leadership role, let them demonstrate that they have that. If they don't have the capacity to do that, then it's pretty clear that they need the training to be able to do that. And then, and again, it's we talked about setting the clear expectations, but the trust and transparency go hand in hand. Trust was listed multiple times on each one of the discussion slides. We know that that's really hard. You've got to build that trust between your leaders and your people. And then transparency, being clear in your communication, being transparent as to the why we're doing what we're doing, no matter what it is. If you can be, doesn't mean opening up books, telling everybody that the discussions that are had at that executive table, but it's really, why are we doing this? What is our end goal? How does it align with our mission, vision, values as an organization? So, that's really, those are the themes. Is there anything outside that, or anything that this group would say, hey, this is one topic we did spend a lot of time talking about, it bubbled up to the surface. What opportunities or challenges did you discuss that you feel, either wasn't shared with the group, or that you really want to make sure everybody just so passionate about, you want to share with the whole group?
I think that Anna should share the last statement she said in our breakout session, because I think people said that was an aha moment for us about the.
Now we're all.
Yes. No, there was a question about managing up, right? Like, what's the, and in my opinion, is like the formula is the same for managing in any direction. So we own our side of the house, and then we inquire about their side of the house. So we always model. So like my coaching is always, you model the behavior that you'd like to see. So we model, we explain what is, and then we ask about their opinion in that framework. And it works in all directions. It works especially if you're consistently doing it over time.
Who's got questions? Let's fire them at our panelists today. You guys answered all the world's questions.
I am curious. curious about, Anna, your perspective on the time dilemma of getting people to be good leaders.
It's consistency. I mean, I think that there's, and I do think that, I actually a data lover too, right? So part of it is how do we convert these things that are sort of nebulous concepts and make them more tactile and tactical, right? And so I think that data doesn't always mean numbers, right? Data can be qualitative, right? Data can be lots of different things. So I think that from that HR position or from a mid-level management position, if we can gather information, right? And then we do want to tie it down to, to bottom line. I think it's really interesting to think there are things that we know to be true, right? Like what is the real cost of attrition? Like it is expensive to bring somebody new in, right? So all of the past couple of collaborative cafes have been about the talent issue that's happening right now. So I think that we're actually despite the fact that we're in this sort of shallow pool of talent, that's actually a huge leveraging point for about we have to develop our internal people. We have to invest in them because it is so expensive to go outside, right? And so I think that depending on the group, depending on the person, can we do both? Right, we make decisions emotionally and we validate logically, right? So we need both sets of data. We need the emotional data and we need the logical data. And then just over and over, keep going.
Something that we talked about in my group was how there's a lot of leadership that have been there for a while and they start to feel comfortable, but we see this turnover in the entry level positions and also the labor market, just like you're saying, is very tight. What are some of the ways that you approach leadership to maybe challenge them to think outside the box if they haven't thought that they've gotten comfortable? They don't realize they've gotten comfortable, or they've been there for 20 years, so they know the ins and outs of the business, but they're not seeing or hearing us when we're saying, hey, we need this, or we need some change.
I was in their group, so they heard no.
The rest of us haven't though.
To me, there is an enormous marketing and comms lens to all communication, right? So I think that there's a thing, when we go back to our data conversation, it's they actually are swimming in it, right? The problem is not ever that there's not enough information. The problem usually is that there's too much information, right? So it's how can we really clearly communicate to them? And literally, not joking, can we make them an infographic? Right, can we give them the information in a simple way that points to the end result that we want them to have, right? And so some of that is creative data gathering, creative communications forming, right? I'm a huge can there be pictures in it? Can there be graphs? Can there be things that are easy? Don't give them a block, a 17-page report. They will not read it, right? So I think those things are important, and I think that you have to just be collecting, it doesn't work to just keep forwarding Harvard Business Review articles. Do you know what I mean?
I mean, you don't read every single one of those that gets sent.
I think finding ways, are they open to hearing about themselves though too? So, when you think about some of our assessment tools that we use between our 360 tools or our PXT profiles of, this is what makes you a great leader. If we're going to plan succession for your role, let's find out more about what you brought to the role. And maybe we'll follow that when we go to backfill that role eventually, but maybe that also just brings to light where there are some traits that we can begin to hone in on in a objective way versus.
I think that circles back to, asking them to be vulnerable, right? Being, kind of be self-reflective, understand that, perfect, right? We all have opportunities.
And again, to modeling the conversation. So our book club, Emma's book club, everybody's at Emma's book club. So Tasha Urich wrote Insights, which is about self-reflection. She's a social psychologist, organizational psychologist. So her data and her research says that 95% of leaders that she studied, it was 6,000 leaders, believe that they are self-aware. 95% believe that they are self-aware. There's a problem. 12 to 15% actually are. 12 to 15%. So that's an 80% gap, right? So I mean that, to your point, right? What can we be doing to sort of feed in, hide the pillow with peanut butter? How do we get them to do some self-reflection, right? Because that's an enormous gap.
Yeah.
Who was the author?
Tasha Urich.
We can set out Anna's book club when we recap that as well.
All right.
So,
Do it.
all right. So, of course,
course, Anna, I want to turn it over, give you maybe 60 seconds, if you could give us a 60-second recap of what Failure Lab is, and for those of you that want to learn more or want to connect or want to see what's available, we did create a QR code. You can pull out your phone and scan it. Go to failurelab.com. But Anna, in a nutshell, tell us more about what Failure Lab is and how you help
So
organizations.
Failure Lab is, we essentially, the overarching umbrella is that we help organizations and humans to develop the tactical skills of navigating discomfort. So generally through a leadership and culture lens, because that's how we shift organizations, right? So what are the uncomfortable things about people leadership? What are the uncomfortable things about being a woman in business? What are the uncomfortable things about whatever the situation is? So that's what we do.
And they're amazing if you haven't gone to a
Yes.
Failure Lab event.
Also, they like dogs.
Yeah, I see you can.
And kids, like and children sometimes.
And Post-its. Thank you so much, Anna. Thanks for being one of our panelists here today. Next, I know you guys are going to be heartbroken, but we do not have a collaborative cafe in April. Spring break, weather's turning, people are going to want to be outside a little bit more, but don't fret. We are partnering on an event with Highland, Innovia, and Paylocity in May. So on May 1st, please join us at the Pinnacle Center in Hudsonville. It's a half-day event, but it's an Elevate and Engage Summit where we're going to be talking about empowering employees for success. So if you haven't checked it out or registered, feel free, please scan that QR code, take a look into it. We'd love to see you there. And then, of course, if you haven't connected with us, like I said, I see a lot of familiar faces, but if you haven't yet, go ahead, you can scan the QR code, it'll take you right to the HR Collaborative page. Otherwise, you can open up the LinkedIn app on your phone, tablet, smart device, click on the search bar, to that little icon on the right, scan that QR code, and you'll be in the Cool Kids Club. So if you're not already, come on in, we invite you to join us. And last but not least, thank you all. Julie, thank you for stepping in to have this conversation. Anna, for popping on over and sharing your wisdom, both of you with our group. And thank you all for coming and joining us in person. Again, hopefully it was a great success.